Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
My name is Patrick Crehan. I'm from CKA in Brussels. And with me here today is Roland Schatz. He's the founder and CEO of the UNGSII. And he's here to speak with us on the Future Now show of the Club of Amsterdam. So welcome to the Future Now show, Roland.
Thank you for having me.
You know, many people have heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. They may not know about the details, but they know that it's an important concept. And even if they know about some of the details, they might be less aware about the work that's being done to make sure that we achieve those goals.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization, why it was set up and the work that it's doing right now?
Yeah, with pleasure. I was born 1965, so almost in between the end of World War II and the wall coming down. I'm lucky being the fifth generation journalist in my family. My grandfather started a newspaper at the border to Switzerland. My grandfather was one of the first who received the telegram 1933 that he's no longer allowed to serve this wonderful profession because the Nazis didn't like his reporting, although he wasn't a Jew, he was a Protestant. And then my both parents were journalists, philosophy, and then tried to serve providing valuable information to the people. And my father, being editor-in-chief of a regional newspaper, asked 1970, when he found out that the German president of the parliament was caught in corruption, to step down, because corruption, as we know today, even better than back then in 1970, is the worstest virus, which is challenging mankind in the most harmful way. COVID is nothing compared to corruption. And the publisher walked next day into his office and asked, "What is this text about?" And my father asked, "Well, did I miss out on certain facts, or am I missing something?" And the publisher said, no, it's actually as you write. But he is a member of the Christian Democratic Party. I'm a member of the Christian Democratic Party, and I don't want my editor-in-chief writing such a text. So my father went home, discussed it with my mom, and decided to step down because he said, the editor-in-chief is in charge of the content, the publisher is in charge of the money. This makes no sense. My mother agreed. He stepped down next day. For the first time ever, he picked me up from school. We went home. He said, come wake up mom so we can have coffee together. And I couldn't wake her up because she had a heart stroke, because she was the daughter of my grandfather, who obviously had difficulties guiding the family through these 12 years of Nazi tyranny. So I come from a family knowing that information is key, and that sometimes it comes along with a price we have to pay. Moving fast forward, I actually wanted to become a concert pianist. I couldn't because I got chronic tendinitis. And then I studied economics in Fribourg, not to become a businessman, but to get a little bit more grounded, because when you spend most of your time with Bach and Beethoven, which is the best what you can do, you are sometimes missing out on other aspects. So I decided to go to Fribourg, study economics, to then become a journalist. And in the first semesters, when you study economics, you start, as we all do when we study economics, with accounting. And the professor directly in 1984 told all of us that if the annual reporting is done in a good way, we might catch 70% of the value of a company. If it's done in a normal way, you catch maybe 50%. How come? Because accountants back then till today are almost obsessed with making sure that they catch every train ticket we use to go from A to B, hopefully not private, but for business. Being really clear on tangibles, but the intangibles, which actually define who you are, who I am, what your company is, what my company is doing. These intangibles are not measured because academics thought back then till today that you can't get a grip on the so-called intangibles, which I believe is rubbish. We can do so. We improved a lot, but because this field of academics, those who are teaching economics, haven't done their homework. I left, I studied philosophy as my parents, and I started Media Tenor, I started Innovatio, and a few years ago I was asked to serve as a senior advisor to the UN Director General, Michael Moller, in Geneva, as we both really like Kofi Annan, and to help create a better understanding and valid data on what is now known as the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm maybe a little long, but it is important to understand why I am so dedicated when it comes to numbers, when it comes to metrics, and that it takes the best of our brains from all continents and from all parts of societies to find out, are we walking on a relevant path towards a better future where nobody's left behind? Or are we continuing to cut corners in which we are rather good when I'm looking into America, when I look in certain parts in Europe? And this definitely has to stop. And these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which were agreed by all heads of states, 193 on September 25, 2015, are giving us a good compass. Nothing more, but nothing less. And it's now on all of us to check this compass. Does it resonate with us? And then to report on an annual basis, are we on track? Yes or no? Because we have to reach these 17 Sustainable Development Goals latest by December 31, 2030.
Great. Listen, what an amazing story. You've raised a lot of issues which go way beyond the Sustainable Development Goals. Maybe we'll get back to those another day. But just coming back to the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, your organization now, the UN GSII, when was it set up? And tell us a little bit about the effort required to get it recognized and funded and on a firm basis.
Yes, absolutely. So basically, as I told you, I had the honor working with Michael Moller. We did this already years before. It was Kofi Annan who announced in the end of the 90s, he was working on the so-called Millennium Development Goals, 15 goals to be reached by 2015. And along with Kofi Annan were a lot of friends. Bopp from the from Harvard Business School, Dr. Faber, back then CEO of Allianz Global Investors, Professor Alexander Bassen, Professor Achleitner, a whole bunch of people, the former president of NASDAQ, Al Berkeley, Joe Kajigal, who managed the UN Pension Fund. You know, it's really a deep group of academics, of business leaders, and we were all aware that sooner or later, we need to get into robust data and a way where reporting really serves the name, being a report and not being greenwashing or serving certain interests, and you can hide whatever you want to hide and nobody will ever ask any questions, as we know it, for instance, from the legal system, that nobody is questioning any judge on what he or she is doing. They can continue with what they are doing, whether they sell judgments, like the former president of the court in Bonn, who committed suicide when he could no longer hide that he was actually selling court rulings, because he was addicted to gaming. So there's a lot of intransparency going on, which is one of the reasons why the world is in the stage in which it is today. And this group, initiated by Kofi Annan, but going really deep into different areas of science, business, society, NGOs, they felt inspired when Ban Ki-moon asked, who was following Kofi Annan, the member states of the United Nations, well, what are we going to do on January 1st, 2016? These Millennium Development Goals have the frame that we should orient on these goals until December 2015. But what then? And the member states then decided to say, well, let's create a new framework, but this time it will be us, the member states, Finland, Germany, Japan, Madagascar, 193 countries who would discuss over a period of 7 years which would be the goals they like to achieve within the next 15 years, and how could they be broken down in detailed targets. So I brought with me something what people rarely see. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But you can see it's like when you create your home, you find for each of these 17 SDGs, you find the sub-goals, the sub-targets, the 169 targets to which we all have agreed that we want to reach them, whether we talk about health, like here, whether we talk about SDG 4, which is coming after the green element. SDG 4 is quality education for everybody, so it's not just my girls who should get good education in their school in Switzerland, but everybody on this planet, whether in Africa or in Asia, all is defined, all is designed, and by using a language which, guess what, even my daughters, although they are only 7 and 10, understand in a second. When Kofi Annan was creating the MDGs, for him it was difficult because the UN is nothing else than a golf club. It's a facilitating entity, but it's the golf players who decide how they play. And in case they don't like the greenkeeper, they kick him out. And Kofi Annan was nothing else than the greenkeeper of the world. So he could only express direction. So he was, with the Millennium Development Goals, talking about, let's reduce poverty. Let's enable that children, no matter where they are, have access to education. Well, guess what? When the member states now sat down and discussed over a period of 7 years how their goals should sound, you no longer read, let's reduce poverty. You read, no poverty, SDG 1. You read, zero hunger, SDG 2. Now, this sounds not only in English almost the same as in German, as it does in Chinese or in Arabic. Most important, zero hunger is clear what this means when we share this with my grandma, when we share this with grandmas in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. Zero hunger is zero hunger. No poverty is no poverty. And no politician, whether it is Mr. Putin or whether it is Angela Merkel or all the others who stood up on September 25, 2015 at the United Nations in New York, and by standing up, declaring that these 17 goals, including the 169 targets, should become a reality in their countries, they knew this is not another typical politician, blah, blah, and who cares, like Angela Merkel, no longer being in office by 2030. Absurdly enough, Putin will most likely still be in office 2030, but that's not the point. The point is they decided this will be the reality in their countries, which we can all measure, which we hopefully will all experience. And while experiencing the progress, we will know very clearly who contributed in which way to the success and to the failure.
Wonderful. It's an amazingly rich story. And you've already provided part of the answer to one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You know, when I initially read about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I had been used to reading about the Millennial Development Goals as well, my first impression was that, you know, this has to do with developing economies. You know, but clearly we have poverty in the advanced economies as well, and homelessness and quality of education for everybody is not a given. So it's, in a sense, it seems a breakthrough in the sense that it's much deeper and more profound as a challenge than just focusing on the needs of developing economies. Could you say something to us, you know, a little bit about, I guess, building on the fact that it's advanced economies like Finland, etc., that were driving the agenda? What does this mean for, say, the industrialized economies in Europe? And how has the game changed in terms of thinking about development?
Oh yes, and thank you for pointing out at Finland, because Finland, I think, is a wonderful lighthouse and role model, inspiring all of us. Because looking back into polling 40 years ago, if you were looking into the country where you had the most unsatisfied people, the ones on the top would be the Finns. And they would not just give this as an answer to a poll by Gallup or the other polling institutes. No, they actually followed what they were describing with their dissatisfaction. If you look into the statistics, which country has the highest amount of people committing suicide, which is the strongest impression of I'm not satisfied with my life, you were finding Finland among the top who would commit suicide in the 80s. The leadership back then said this has to end. There's no reason why people are so frustrated with their life, why they see no perspective. And like Nelson Mandela, the Finnish leadership decided to start by sports. Because what is most important in politics is that we make sure that every person in our country is aware of what we aim at, what we try to achieve. And therefore they said, look, we all are more or less good in playing ice hockey. But it makes no sense that each time when we get invited to the global championship, that we end up as being the ones who go home first. We should be at least among the top 5. So they changed a little bit in their national procedure and the trainings, etc. And guess what? Early 90, the Finns were not only among the top 5, actually they won the Ice Hockey World Championship, which caused a tremendous change of spirit in the country. And again, it was political leadership to not then rest and say, well, cool, we reached our goal. But the political leadership back then asked their people, well, is this now enough? Illustrating that we are really good in playing ice hockey, or can we be good in something else? So they decided that if they want to make change possible in their country for everybody, it has to start with SDG 4, education. And we all know from our OECD reports, over the last 20 years, guess who is leading the countries in the world with the best education? It's the Finns. And I want to end on this example with inviting all of you to take a look at the statistics, which are published once per year, which are the most happy people in the world, which are the people who are most satisfied with their life. And guess what? During the last 5 to 10 years, you find now the Finns either on top or rank 2 or rank 3. Having said this, I want to stress the point that yes, when all these 193 heads of states stood up on September 25, 2015, which is 6 years ago, declaring that these amazing 17 sustainable development goals have to be our new compass and that they will be reached by December 2030. The traditional reaction, not only as a journalist, would have been, I don't know what they smoked, I don't know who paid them, but that these 193, all of them, not one stayed in his seat or her seat. All of them stood up. And the other heads of states who were not allowed to enter America, I'm pretty sure they would have stood up as well. They are not stupid. They were not under drugs. I think they were united after 7 years of debate with their universities, with their core stakeholders in each of their country, because they know the money to reach these 17 SDGs in all countries in the world is there. The know-how is there. The only thing what is missing is that we change our mindset and that we start with SDG 16, which is building trusted institutions, stopping corruption, explaining what we do by taking SDG 17 serious, and SDG 17 is teamwork. And that's the spirit of the 21st century. And yes, there are too many politicians, and not only politicians, there are businessmen and academics and others who are still stuck in the mindset of the 20th century. But guys, look at your calendar. This is now April 2021. This is now already 21 years into the new century. Wake up.
Yeah.
And enjoy waking up, because your daughters and your sons and your family will embrace you for waking up and accepting this new spirit, which is based on teamwork and no longer on me, me, and me.
Great, great story. And for years, I followed the case of Finland, but I had no idea of the link with the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, this has totally changed my perception of how development, the concept of growth and development has really shifted in some countries. I mean, Finland is a good case. I'd like to mention the fact we have some really important ambitions in Europe right now. And perhaps one of the most ambitious projects is the idea of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. And so a lot of people have this in mind. What is the link between the SDGs and this goal of becoming carbon neutral in 2050? The time horizons are different, 2050 versus 2030, and the subjects, SDGs, are much more diverse in nature. So could you tell us, how do you see as the link, how is one supporting the other?
Oh, absolutely. Here we go. SDG 13, climate action. And speaking about Europe, on one hand, I was proud to hear Ursula von der Leyen and Franz Timmermans announcing the Green Deal, which I think can be a game changer and should be a game changer. But as I said earlier on, just looking how COVID-19 was treated by the European Commission,
Yeah.
and the European member states let the European Commission fail so big,
Yeah.
is exactly what we need to discuss right now.
Yeah.
We need Europe, and it is ridiculous to even illustrate this. Europe as Africa, or you can't talk it down. We are in this together, and even if the Brits decide that they no longer want to belong to the continent, you can't push history back. History is part of our DNA, and what created the greatness and the spirit of Britain was as influenced by the great thinkers from the continent, and vice versa. The Belgium, the German, the philosophy, the culture, the literature wouldn't exist without the inspiration from our friends in UK.
Yeah.
But having said that, if there's one entity which is a complete failure when it comes to getting things done, then it is the European Commission.
Mm-hmm.
In my business career, I had to deal with Brussels. I was part of tender processes. So I know what I'm talking about when I'm saying, if there is one institution which has no clue how to do proper tender processes in order to achieve what they want to achieve, then it is Brussels. Brussels is built on, I think, a misconstruct. Brussels is definitely built on intransparency. So we will never reach carbon neutrality if we are not changing this. We need proper data. And in that moment, you can see what makes a difference.
Yeah.
We have now schools, we have universities, and we have the Fridays for Future movement, where people can do their testing. How clean is their water? How clean is the air? How clean is the ground, the soil?
Yeah.
And whatever Brussels will declare will be double-checked by kids in schools in Trondheim, in Espoo, in Lodge, all over the continent. And that is my big hope, because the European Union is, as amazing and as important it is smaller than the United Nations.
Yes.
And all heads of states got together, including the European Union heads of states, to decide that these 17 Sustainable Development Goals are our new compass.
Yeah.
And guess what? The European Parliament is already mapping each of these 28 states, how they are progressing in regards to implementing these 17 SDGs. And they are publishing a report every year.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the numbers are not that convincing.
Yeah.
But never mind, we will get there. Rome wasn't invented on one day. It takes a little time, but that is why it is so important that we have networks like UN SDSN, like UN Academic Impact, like UN Habitat, the different agencies who are all very dedicated to ensure that we will not fail, not only on climate, on SDG 13, but on all 17 SDGs.
Again, you raise a number of issues which deserve, further development. I must say I was disappointed by the reaction of some of the member states regarding COVID, and some behave better than others. And I guess it's just a reflection of the sheer complexity of the job that organizations like the EU faces, and also the UN. And a lot comes down to leadership. But we'll discuss these things another day, hopefully. One of the things I'd like to remark is that on your website, you have a number of very interesting reports. And I'm struck by the amount of effort that has gone into the kind of monitoring and benchmarking work that you've done. Just to quote some figures, for the benefit of the viewers, You've been following 500 of the largest companies in the world. Between 2001 to 2018, you've examined more than 2 million reports, 1 million quotes by financial analysts. And in 2017 to 2018 alone, you've analyzed 500,000 statements from these companies. And this is an extraordinary amount of work. And all of this has been done by human analysts. So could you tell us a little bit about the people behind the scenes? Who are they? How are they organized? And also, is this work going to grow in the years to come as more organizations increase their transparency and come on board the overall SDG project?
No, absolutely. And this is actually giving me the comfort knowing that there are hundreds of people who are now not only convinced that we need a better way of accounting, a better way of reporting, a holistic approach. Just look at what Dennis Snower, the long-serving president of the Kiel Institute for Global Economy, has developed with his SAGE index, where he says we need to move away from just looking into GDP. We need to look into all facets to get a better idea how countries are developing. You can name the OECD Better Life Index, which is clearly giving a better indicator how we are developing compared if we only look into something which was designed 50 years ago by trying to measure GDP, which again is only capturing the tangibles and missing on the intangibles, which is leading that every 10 years the financial markets are collapsing. And the financial markets had been collapsing not because they have to, they are only collapsing because the national governments feel okay by not requiring better standards of reporting to make sure that the next finance collapse will not happen. But that's a different topic. But as I mentioned earlier on, we have Professor Eccles, we have Professor Bassen, Professor Achlein. You know, I could talk on and on and on. You have really amazing scholars who developed a roadmap and indicators, making sure that we are not missing out on relevant aspects. And as I said earlier on, I'm a fifth generation journalist. What I decided to do was setting up a research institute, which is called Media Tenor, which is analyzing day by day how what we call the lead media like BBC or CBS in America or other newspapers like Wall Street Journal or the FT, what type of information are they providing to the world? What do we see? And most important, what do we not see? And having a team of analysts reading these newspapers day by day and watching the TV, primetime news and radio and social media, we decided to have this team of analysts who are all full-time analysts. They are not part-timers or students, that they read through the only part, the only section of a public listed company's annual report, which I recommend to take a look at, which is not the numbers section. The financials are, as we heard, covering max 50% of the value of the company. So this is, as you know, I'm a pianist. This is as if I would play the Moonlight Sonata only with the left hand. No audience in the world would accept that. They would all kick me out, and very right so. But if Facebook, if it's Google, whether it is Unilever, if it's Volkswagen, I don't care, that they are still allowed to report on standards which are worse than any other standards which we are experiencing when it comes to Fukushima or others. You know, we have standards when it comes to saving our lives. And it seems that we are absolutely not interested in implementing at least a minimum standard when it comes to our money.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And that is why I set up Media Tenor, and why we then offered, when it became clear that the SDGs will become the new compass, that they will be announced, that I asked Michael Moller, can we create the UNGSII Foundation with two goals? Number one, hold the top 500 companies from all continents transparent in regards to their commitment. Do they really want to move into the SDGs, yes or no? Because if BMW, if Toyota, if GE, if they turn the back on these new goals, we could just leave the room and ask for new goals, or probably no more goals. But surprisingly enough, on April 19th, 2017, when we published the first report, we were able to share with the friends in New York at the UN that already 70% of all the analyzed listed stock companies had referenced to one or more of the SDGs when they were explaining how they spent their money last year and what their plans are for the future in the non-financial section of the annual report, where the chairman writes what his plans are, the CEO, the CFO, and then the company. So in the non-financials, 70% were already in one way or the other referencing to these SDGs. And guess what? We are now about to conclude our report for the 2020 annual reports. And we are now reaching the level of almost 90% of the top 500 companies that they are explaining why they do and what they do along the SDGs. Now, yes, this is a self-assessment. This is what the chairman writes, what the CEO writes, what the CFO writes, but don't get me wrong. We are looking into the officially listed and signed annual report.
Yeah.
You cannot, or you should not, as Toyota, write that you pay men and women the same, and then you don't do that. This will cost you a lot of money. So therefore, our focus is on the non-financial part, where they explain what have we done and what are we going to do, and then signing it. And another very important aspect is, as we all learned from Mr. Trump, if we look at SDG 5, gender equality, we wouldn't tick the box for any of the 500 stock listed companies if they would just mention gender equality like Mr. Trump did each time when he got caught by abusing a woman. Next day he did a press conference by saying, I like women. That's not enough to make it into getting a score on SDG 5. Our analysts are reading line by line, are these companies concrete when they talk about gender equality? Are they giving examples so that my grandmother, if she wants to check, that she has a chance to check? So that was one element. And in this one element, which is so important for the whole initiative started by Bopp and the others, which is either one report or integrated reporting, which means nothing else. Stop writing big books called your sustainability report if you are not willing to make it part of your legal binding annual report. There is no need for two reports. It's one report. And if you are still continuing publishing sustainability reports and you don't make them legally binding, feel responsible for the trees and don't do it. You are either in this game and you want to disclose or not. And trust me, each of the kids of the Fridays for Future movement is aware of that. Nobody is reading your sustainability reports unless you don't make them legally binding. But again, the good news is 90% of the legal binding annual reports are already referring to the SDGs. And now comes the almost miracle. When we gave these data to Al Berkeley, the former president of NASDAQ, and said, can you create a fund How about you make money on these data?
Yeah.
And together with his friend from Princeton Capital, who used to manage the UN Pension Fund, they set up the SCR 500, how we called it. And over the last 4 years, the cumulative return is somewhere like 53%. So we are not talking about the moment you feel responsible for your investment. So you start asking ethical questions, you are asking environmental questions, you are asking other questions. The gangsters, if you let me say, from Deutsche Bank and from Goldman Sachs, who 20 years, 30 years were responding to the One Report initiative in a way that if you ask these additional questions, this will cost basis points for the investors, and therefore we try to be ignorant on that.
Yeah.
We prove them really wrong. A cumulative return of 53% over the last 4 years. That is illustrating it is not costing you basis points. It's rather the other way around, which Dr. Faber, who used to be the chairman of the German Stock Exchange, and before that, he was the CEO of Allianz Global Investors. He bought PIMCO,
Yeah.
the American guy, Bill Gross, who always had the impression that sustainability is not relevant.
Yeah.
Dr. Faber proved them wrong. It's very clear that if you want to be invested within the Sustainable Development Goals, this is not costing you money. It is creating wealth overall for society, but explicitly for the one who is putting money into the SDGs. Now, these are only stock listed companies, and I couldn't care less because I have worked for too long for stock listed companies.
Yeah.
But thanks to the Dutch government, where we have now since 4 years the supply chain law, thanks to the French government, where we have the supply chain law since 2 years, and thanks to the German government, where we are going to have a supply chain law as of this year. And what I'm hearing out of Brussels, the European Union is trying to move towards supply chain law as well. We have now the amazing opportunity to come to a just economy model, which we were all dreaming about, that SMEs who want to not only provide good service as a company, but who feel responsible to society, that they find ways that they can express what they do, which is beyond producing a product which is hopefully top quality, fair price, and produced in a way that nobody feels ashamed. But on top, by expressing which of the SDGs are close to the heart of the SME owners and the management and their employees, we can now go full circle, hand in hand with the supply chain law, proving those who decided that we need something like a supply chain law, that they are not creating new boundaries and making life miserable for entrepreneurs, but it's the other way around, because I very much hope, although I shared with you my skepticism when it comes to Brussels or the European Union getting concrete in tenders.
Yeah.
But any contract given by the European Union to a company should in future only be given to an SME which is disclosing on their SDG footprint. We have this movement of B Corps. We have other initiatives which are aiming in this direction. And I don't understand why a governor in Argentina, the governor of the city Mendoza, made it already mandatory for his legal teams. They can only give contracts to companies which are B Corps. If you're not a listed and a testified company which is disclosing on your societal environmental footprint, you can't get the contract. As simple as that. And I don't get it why the friends in Brussels are wasting year after year and not following this amazing example from Argentina.
You touched on a lot of issues there. And our starting point was about the teams that you have involved in this work. You mentioned that they read the reports line by line and they focus on the non-financial stuff. So it seems to me that one of the strengths of your organization is that you have full-time people employed rather than occasional contractors and,
Exactly.
like academics who dip in and out every now and then, or even volunteers.
That doesn't work.
No,
No, you need to assure that
Yeah.
the analysis is done in 2021 in the same way as we started 1994. There's no change. And everything is transparent. We do intercodal reliability tests. We do validation tests. We give these data for free to all academics. There were more than 2,000 theses written over the last 25 years based on these data, because you can't ask others to be transparent when you are hiding your own data. Makes no sense.
Indeed. And the other thing is, I guess, because you have people who are well paid and loyal and trained, etc. I mean, this gives you an antidote against the whole issue of greenwashing. I mean, they read not just line by line, but between the lines. Do you have an opinion on the scale of greenwashing? I mean, to what extent is this happening, and more explicitly, what can you do to protect yourself against this in your reporting?
Well, as a scientist, I need to be careful if you say they read between the lines, because we are very proud since 1994 that the research is done by giving fair data on what is written, so you can double check. You can do the same research a second time, a third time, a fifth time, a 10th time, and you should always come to the same result.
Okay.
Therefore, we spend 6 months when we train our analysts, and the toughest part is don't read between the lines. We are actually not interested in your personal opinion, in your political position. You should have a political position, but the moment you enter your desk, you sit in front of the computer and you analyze the annual report of Toyota, or you read the FT, you have to do it according to the code book, which defines what is the topic, is there a rating, what type of rating is it, and this methodology, it's scientific. But I know what you tried to say. Yes. And coming to your main point, there are amazing institutions who try to go into each fabric, trying to find out, do the production lines are using filters, or are they polluting the water, etc. Yeah. That is not what UNGSII is doing. Be very clear. Yeah. But I was always skeptical when I heard about institutions making the judgment, oh, you can't be invested in Deutsche Telekom because we found in a local paper in America that a daughter of a daughter company of Deutsche Telekom has a court case where they got accused that they don't want trade unions in their company. Yeah. And because somebody like Reputation Institute and others, by Googling around, find this one text, then people on the investment decision desk were coming to the conclusion we cannot be invested in Deutsche Telekom. And that, I have to say, makes me nervous. Because if you are not looking into, okay, which local paper was this where we found this report? And secondly, is somebody who is accused of having done X or Z, is he already guilty of having done that? Or is just the fact that a journalist, and remember, I'm a fifth generation journalist, but I know that we as journalists can get things wrong, as every judge can get things wrong, as every politician gets things wrong. That's human. So why do you think you can make a decision which states we cannot be invested in Deutsche Telekom, because somewhere in a local paper in America, somebody is writing about something which is not even a last ruling of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Whereas our approach is slightly different, or not slightly. I think it's more robust by starting with the top management, the chairman, the CEO, the CFO, the complete company, legally binding. What do you want? What do you try to achieve?
Yes.
What is your commitment to the world? But then not stopping there. These are the 500,000 sentences basically written by these companies. But then we take a second step and we look into how do business journalists from Wall Street Journal, FT, Handelsblatt, Les Echos, how do these media accompany these companies?
Yes.
Do we find a reporting in the newspapers and TV news, etc., which is going in line with what the company is saying? We want to treat men and women the same. And then in the newspaper, I find lots of stories which are questioning that.
Yeah.
Then I get nervous and say, well, now what is correct? What is not correct?
Yes.
But I'm not stopping there. These are the 2 million reports which we analyzed since 2001. The third basket is my team is reading every day, every single judgment when a financial analyst gets quoted, somebody from Goldman Sachs or somebody from BNP Paribas, coming to the conclusion, buy the stock of BMW or sell the stock of Lufthansa. We read the why.
Yeah.
Because they mistreat their employees, because they are polluting the air, because whatever the reason is. And only when we find a match between what the company is declaring in their legal binding document, what the media are saying, and what these financial analysts are saying, if this goes hand in hand, then we give these data to Al Berkeley and his team and say, well, now pick out of these 160 stocks from the 500, create your fund. And I'm proud to say that this research is more solid and more detailed than UBS or any other bank is doing, because these guys were cutting on their own research.
Sure.
They are not even interested in that. What they do is they are hiring people in their supervisory boards, but they are no longer having them as part of their own team. And you know what? The European Union, as I'm very critical, I have to give applause to Brussels, because as of last month, everybody who is managing other people's money as of March 2021 has to disclose how each of these investments are in line with sustainability principles.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not SDGs, but at least we start with sustainability. And I can tell you, neither Deutsche Bank nor UBS or any of them would even have the own research being able to make such a report.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And don't get me wrong, none of them is not making profits the years before. They made quite an amazing amount of profits. So from these profits, they could easily finance a solid, reasonable research department, which would give their own investment teams a much better base, knowing why they buy the stock of company A and sell the stock of company B.
Very interesting. You mentioned the supply chain law, and I have a specific interest in, I work a lot with SMEs, smaller companies, and I'm confronted with the issue of how they manage the transition to net zero and how they bring on board all of these reporting initiatives, which are burdensome even for large companies. So how is the burden transmitted down through the supply chain? Could you summarize quickly, what you mean by the supply chain law for those who are not familiar with it, and also the challenge from an SME point of view and how you see this evolving.
Oh yes, the supply chain law is basically trying to get concrete on a matter which is crystal clear. Nobody should sell a product, whether it is a car or whether it is a drug or whether it is painting, whatever, without being clear and being able to state that the product is absolutely in line with the Constitution. The Dutch Constitution, as the French Constitution, as the German Constitution, and our laws are very clear. There shouldn't be child labor involved, for instance. We shouldn't pollute our rivers. And in case we pollute our rivers, we have to stand in and make sure that we stand in for the costs getting these rivers back clean.
Okay.
We should treat our employees in an absolutely fair and just way. So what the supply chain law in the Netherlands, in France, and in Germany is trying to do is reiterating what is already a reality. Volkswagen, Lufthansa, BMW, when they sell their cars and they sell their flights and they make a lot of money, they should be sure and they should testify it to us, the people, that there was no cheating going on towards the Constitution. Now, as always, you have the different interest groups rallying against it because they say, well, this leads to a lot of the SMEs who can no longer work for the big companies because the supply chain law is basically focused at the top companies with more than 500 employees. And as we all know, the realities of business life is that these big companies start by requesting this from their suppliers. And if the suppliers aren't able to come with a full documentation, then Volkswagen or others would no longer continue working with the supplier. I think this is not a burden. I think this is the once in a lifetime opportunity for us entrepreneurs to finally get involved into our own report. I started my publishing house 1985. I started Media Tenor 1994. But in all these decades, guess what? My accountant, who did my annual report for me as an SME, he never ever asked me a simple question. Roland, what do you try to achieve with Innovatio? Publishing the books, doing the events. What do you try to achieve with Media Tenor? I know you are running the reputation insurance reports for Allianz Insurance, so companies can insure themselves against media damage. But what do you do? What is the purpose of your company? They never ask me. Yeah. He gets obsessed if I'm missing one train ticket. Yeah. But he has no interest in what Media Tenor stands for and what Innovatio stands for. And I think that's wrong. And giving us, for the first time, an opportunity to maybe just start with one page, which should be actually at the beginning of our annual report and not in the back. Yeah. Declaring, okay, Media Tenor is in line with the Constitution. You know, we were not spoiling water. We are treating our employees the same. You know, this could be the intro paragraph, but then why not giving me 3 additional paragraphs where I explain what makes me tick, what makes my employees tick, and what is the purpose of our company. And with this annual report, our contracting partners who are blue chips could state towards the government. When you work with Innovatio, when you work with Media Tenor, this is fully in line with the supply chain. And I think that's very European. That's a good approach for the future.
I agree. And we're coming up to the end of our time there. And just I want to make a remark. You know, at the beginning, you spoke about the need for transparency and the shortcomings of traditional reporting formats, the role of accountants, etc. And right now, we seem to be in a kind of a golden age of reporting, in the sense that there's a burgeoning variety of reporting formats. CSR, ESG, there's also CDP, the natural capitals reporting, etc. It's very interesting, really fascinating to follow this stuff, but it is confusing.
Yep.
And so could you maybe, just as a wrap-up statement, so could you tell us a little bit about how you see this evolving in the future? Will this complexity, will there be merging of formats? Will it simplify? And what role do you see for your organization, the UN, and maybe also the European Commission going forward?
Well, first of all, it's a shame that the accounting industry has not changed fundamentally.
Yeah.
As far as I know, since 2008, when we talk about too big to fail, I'm surprised that Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, that they are still around. And what I was told is the fact that they are still around is only because of too big to fail.
Yeah.
So if they got away with this, the minimum what I had expected is that they are among the front runners, making sure never, ever again.
Yeah.
Kofi Annan in 2008 said he will hold every bank accountable until they paid the last penny. Backing Kofi Annan, we were publishing the Trust Meltdown report every year, not only on the banks and the insurances, but as well on the accounting industry. Yeah. So unfortunately, I have to say, looking into Wirecard, it was the FT asking the right questions,
yeah,
and the accounting industry going after the FT,
yeah,
to no longer being allowed to publish what the FT thought they would correctly publishing. We know the outcome. And I have to say, if we don't stop this more or less immediately, the next Wirecard will come around the corner, and we have the same people declaring with big eyes they were surprised. Guys, this is no longer the time for declaring you are surprised when it is not a surprise. When it was already my professor in 1984 very clearly saying that the absolute base is not enough, we have to change this.
Yeah.
So looking forward, to me, it's irritating that we are still talking about ESG, that we are talking about these different standards, when at the same time, all 193 heads of states in 2015 declared the SDGs as the compass. So everybody who is not reporting along the SDGs should ask himself and herself, why the heck are you not beefing up your game into this new standard? But to end on a positive note, I was 10 when I crossed the German border. You know, we had this wall dividing East and West Germany. I was born in West Germany, visiting friend in the East. I came back, spoke with my father and said, this wall is a disaster, it has to change. My father's response in 1975 was, Roland, you need to pick goals which you can achieve. This wall will stay forever, so try another one. Guess what? On November 9, 1989, I was dancing on the wall. I was in East Berlin. The wall is history. The wall is gone. So if somebody says we can't reach the SDGs by 2030, I always give them the example of the Berlin Wall. If we were able to get rid of this Berlin Wall within 14 years, why not implement the SDGs? I don't see a real problem, because the only wall we are facing right now is the wall which we have in our heads. So get rid of your wall in your head and enjoy, become part of a movement which is simply fascinating, and it gives confidence, and it gives pleasure, because this is more than just work.
Roland, that's a great note to finish on. It's been really fascinating talking to you. I can tell you I'm a fan of you and your organization and the work that you're doing. And I wish you lots of luck and success. I know there'll be challenges, but I hope we'll be able to come back with you again, maybe in a year or so, and you can give us an update on the progress that you've made and the challenges, the new challenges that you're facing. So with that, thank you again so much for being with us, and I look forward to meeting you again soon.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.